Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I guess apologies. The estimate on last show we did, which was a month ago, was the end of the first round of the playoffs. We'd be back. Brian, COVID life and school and all that. It's dragging. It's 2 years in the making, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm just slugging through it, but we're back. It's
We're back.
it's
I've been watching
it's
so much basketball. How could I ever do a show?
that's well it's I was gonna say it's so funny. I've listened back to a couple of old Box Score Geek shows from the beginning of COVID, and it's so Groundhog's Day. It's just be like, okay, we're almost through it.
Oh,
It'll be, we're almost there. And
yep.
And then now apparently in 2022, we're recording this on May 19th, 2022. Monkeypox might be a thing. So I don't even know.
That sounds like a card for Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, seriously, just sounds made up, but it is a thing apparently. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk the second round of the NBA playoffs. We tried to make it under the wire before they started, but we have one game under our belt from each series finished, and we're recording this in the midst of the second game of the Boston Celtics Miami Heat game. I'll jinx things, Brian. I think that game's decided, although I think the last game looked decided too, and then Jimmy Butler went off. So we shall see. But we're going to go over the second round of the playoffs, which gives us lots and lots and lots of topics to discuss, and that will be our show. Anything else you want to say?
No. I've been watching these games, and it's been interesting. We'll get into them and discuss more of it. But just overall, I mentioned this to you briefly before the game. The final four teams remaining are all in the top six regular season defensive teams. Defense is really dominating in the playoffs so far.
And I don't recall, actually. I'm really tired from today, Brian. I don't remember if I did intros, but I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, found most places Nerd Numbers. Of course, co-host, voice of God, man at Benny Hats, Brian Foster, who you can find on Twitter as Box Score Brian. And like our team, the best offense is a good defense. Let us get going. All right. I think I'll save predictions on this round till the very, very end. So let's get going on the previous series. I'm just going to go in the order I have them on the script, which I think is East first, then West, and I don't recall if I did seeding. Milwaukee versus Boston. So this was a very interesting series. Went to Game 7. Certainly Milwaukee had a chance, right? Could have won it in Game 6. I think that was at home, but then lost on the road to Boston. Kind of a contentious series in that Robert Williams III, aka the Time Lord. By the way, do you know why he's called the Time Lord? I actually looked it up for this series.
I do, yeah, because he was taking heat in the media for being late for a meeting, and some fans got annoyed with that and started getting his back. That's how I understand the story. They say, it's like Gandalf, a wizard can never be late. He's always exactly on time. Well, Robert Williams, the Time Lord, knows exactly when he needs to show up to a meeting.
But Robert Williams III was injured for part of the series, as was Chris Middleton. Now, the rough part using the regular season is Robert Williams is arguably the best per minute starter caliber player in the NBA. I think he got 1,800 minutes total this season, but for players above that threshold of above 1,500, he is the best per minute player. Kind of. I looked this up, Brian. There was still an out for Nikola Jokic. If we just look at raw productivity, Nikola Jokic was the most productive high minutes player in the NBA this season. Robert Williams, though, is higher wins per 48 because he's a power forward, not a center. So like Nikola Jokic, the key, what I'll give you is like he was the most effective player in the NBA per minute at the hardest position. And even when we factor in the hardest position, he still laps everybody else in the field by like 3 wins. And we discussed him in last week's show. He was clearly the MVP. But Robert Williams, the highest wins per 48 player in the NBA versus Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton is a above average player. We've seen him play very well in the past, but they were both injured for the series. I think Williams mattered more than Middleton, and the Celtics were able to persevere without him and won. So,
well, I need to state the obvious. Williams missed part of the series, but he played for a good part of it as well. So just having Middleton miss the whole thing, I think, was a big difference.
Well, the good news on Williams is he did actually look productive because Another player I'll throw out there, and we'll get to in a second, right, is Joel Embiid. And then, of course, Chris Paul. And there's this notion of a player gets injured, comes back in the middle of the series. You're like, oh, are they going to do well? And they actually play terrible. And you could make the argument they hurt their team. So Robert Williams being injured and then coming back like was a mixed bag. It did look like he still played productive and still did very well. But what I'll say about this series in general, I said Boston, but I actually meant to say Milwaukee. Milwaukee at Dallas infuriate me in that they have one of the best players in the NBA. For Milwaukee, that's Giannis, and for Dallas, that's Luka Doncic. And neither of these players, in my opinion, has gotten the reasonable support I would expect. Right? It is somewhat infuriating to see Brook Lopez next to Giannis. I've argued for years that letting Malcolm Brogdon walk was a mistake. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks did manage to still win a title last season, but I argue their odds would have been much improved if they'd kept a player of Malcolm Brogdon's caliber. So it's frustrating to say that I think Giannis is well on his way to hitting Mount Rushmore. Here's a tough one, Brian. I think Kevin Durant is still comfortably in the lead, but like fan and Golden State Warriors fan, how far from Kevin Durant would you put Giannis Antetokounmpo like all time at this point?
Oh wow. I mean, he's younger enough that it's I don't think it's that close yet. But I would bet if you looked at KD's production through Giannis's current age, Giannis might have an edge at the same age.
But I mean, Giannis is kind of ridiculous because I'm starting to see these like, is Giannis all time? And you think about it, right? Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time MVP, Finals MVP. I think let me see if I can get this up quickly. In the near future,
I'll put it to you this way: if you're putting together the 5 best players to win a game right now, I'm putting both of those guys on it for sure.
Well, Kevin Durant is really interesting. I mean, obviously we're not talking about him through last series because he wasn't in the last round, but what I will say about him is he has not looked 100% since his Golden State Warriors days, and that starts making things really rough about injury and even like where he belongs on the current list. These last 4 seasons out of Giannis, by the way, are absolutely ridiculous. I think one thing that kind of gets harder compared to historical NBA is obviously the minutes are lower. Part of that is things like COVID shortened. Part of it is the post-COVID shortened season. But just on a per minute production standpoint, the last 4 years, and then I would say, let's see, 2017 is up there. From a Bricado Prime standpoint, 1, 2, 3, 4. If he puts up one more season like this, I think he's on Mount Rushmore for a Bricado Prime, which would be ridiculous. Sorry, I hate to say this, Kevin Durant, I don't know where he's going to stand on if it was him versus Giannis right now in the NBA, I'd take Giannis. It's not even a question.
Yeah.
And who knows where he's going to be, and that's really rough. And
it's not just age. I like Giannis's play style better as well. Less, isolation play, which Kevin Durant is really good at, and most people aren't. But still, I like more of a team player generally.
Yeah, I mean, he can do everything, triple double machine. Modern day Magic Johnson. I'll definitely take it. I'm trying to think of anything else to say on this series. I mean, the good news for Boston, a couple of things. We love Robert Williams. He's finally starting to get minutes now. Not enough, but this gets into an annoying territory. It is always really hard to know if a player has injury issues and the team is kind of being careful with that, because no team out there has any incentive to come out and say, we're really worried about our players' health. I'm inclined to believe that Robert Williams just is still not getting the minutes he deserved, although it is going up. It's very Dennis Rodman-like, but that is still huge. The other player that's key on Boston right now, Tatum, seems like he's back, and Tatum was really fascinating.
Yep.
And I'll say this is a funny point, and it's weird that we're still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, but maybe people have passed it on. He was one of the first players to get it, if I recall.
Oh,
and he
right.
looked really bad. He looked really bad after. And that was it is so amusing. We talked this on last week's show. It is so amusing how quickly people just want to move on from the pandemic, from COVID, from stuff like that, and just ignore that the NBA had 2 back-to-back seasons that were super atypical, and you had a bunch of players that got COVID. Not even the stupid Kyrie Irving standpoint, right? You had people that got COVID just for because they were players playing inside. The entire like Utah Jazz caught it super early on, and it's a respiratory illness, and some people with like long COVID. I've just heard like normal humans, right, not NBA players talk about it, and it's a big deal. And so it's like it wouldn't be shocking that an NBA player would be off their game. This is an in general point that's going to come up over and over on this week's show about injury mattering to key players. So like Tatum looks back and he looked off for a few years, and COVID plus shortened season could very, very easily explain. But Robert Williams, Tatum, now the really weird one, Brian, to me, the one that is just blowing my mind, Al Horford. I don't get it. This guy's a million years old and he played good during the regular season and has been playing amazing during the playoffs. So Boston, if healthy, looks great. And in fact, in this current series, the Miami versus Boston series, they lost game 1. And the first inclination I had was to go, oh, Robert Williams only got 29 minutes versus Jimmy Butler's 41. That's unacceptable. However, when I looked at it, they were missing Marcus Smart and Al Horford. I don't want to dig much deeper because I do believe there was COVID protocols involved, I think, with Al Horford, but I don't want to find if he's anti-vax, Brian. I just do not have the energy now to deal with another Kyrie Irving. But game 1, they were missing Marcus Smart and Al Horford. So it's like you're missing 2 of your starters in a playoff game, and Al Horford's back, and Al Horford's been great. And actually, Al Horford and Tice have been kind of frustrating in that our thesis is Robert Williams is amazing, and I want to get more mad at his minutes. But the real issue is their backup guards aren't great. Tatum and Marcus Smart are really, really good. Jalen Brown, not Brunson. He's other team. Jalen Brown is really, really good. The backup ones like Grant or something is just not great. So like the Celtics thing is like, as long as they've got a healthy backcourt, they're the favorite, right? They're the favorite currently.
Yeah, well, they're assuming this score holds up and they take the home court advantage back from Miami because they're the number 2 seed. Yeah, I would say so.
Well, I would put it more.
But you're saying who's the betting favorite? I'm not sure.
I was going to say, if we look at the remaining teams in the NBA, the Boston Celtics had a regular season SRS of 7.02. And you could make the argument with like Robert Williams getting healthy and Jason Tatum, who looked better post All-Star break. You could make the argument they're even better than their rating, 7.02, versus the Golden State Warriors, who are 5.52. Now, Golden State Warriors are a little frustrating. There's, Steph Curry got beat up. Other players have been beat up, but that beat upness is staying through the playoffs. Like Gary Payton is injured. Klay Thompson is back, which is great, but he's I'll make a metaphor for you here, Brian. You'll appreciate. You remember the Mighty Ducks?
Remember the Titans? Yeah, I remember the Mighty.
Well, no, the Mighty Ducks.
Klay Thompson's doing the flying wedge a little too much. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was going to compare him to Fulton Reed. So Fulton Reed in the Mighty Ducks was a defenseman who had a slap shot. Now, this fails as a metaphor in the Mighty Ducks because in the movie The Mighty Ducks, he's like he could only hit this amazing slap shot 1 in 5 times. That would make him the most dominant defenseman in the NFL. That would be interesting too, right, Brian? Most dominant defenseman in the NHL ever if he had a slap shot that hit a 20% accuracy of hitting the net and going in. In the movie, they play it off as bad. Klay Thompson, like in the playoffs, is like 1 for 5 on amazing games. So 4 games doesn't play great. 1 plays good, but if he can look better, he looked better last game. So it's like if Klay Thompson shoots above 50%, I think the Warriors are the favorite, and the real question is what are they going to look like going into the finals if they make the finals. Try to get the cart in front of the horse.
Game 6, Klay. Yeah, I'm a little against you on Boston because I think Rob Williams' injuries have been the main reason for his reduced minutes. He did miss 22 games, and he's missed games recently in the playoffs. So I think he's just been hurt the whole time, and they're just trying to nurse him along and give him whatever minutes, that he can give. So I think that's a big part of it. Now, if he's fully healthy next year and the minutes don't go up, we'll see. But I think that's a big part of it.
All right. Anything else to say on Milwaukee versus Boston?
Yeah, I like the supporting cast better than you. Connaughton is a great guy off the bench. He's exactly the kind of 3-and-D player you want. I think they have, and of course, Drew Holiday is great. Like, and he's had some great playoff games as well. So I think with Middleton in there and their depth looks a little better, I think they're fine. But yes, you are right. Brook Lopez didn't really play a lot being hurt. And then they just kind of threw him in there. And yeah, he shot a bunch of bricks from three. They'd be better off going with Bobby Portis or someone else.
Yeah. So what's fascinating is Drew Holiday has had injury in the past, and you could make the argument that he was a bad signing. What made him a good signing, though, I've called this the Ray Allen principle in the past, is Giannis clearly was looking elsewhere potentially. Or this was maybe just overhyped in the media because the media is bored. But when the Bucks picked up Drew, I think that was enough to convince Giannis they were serious, and he re-signed. So Drew would be worth it on his own if he wasn't an above average player. And he has been a very good player. So absolutely. Now, Chris Middleton overpaid, but isn't killing you. Brook Lopez is just bad. And so, I mean, that's kind of the thing is like, if you look at the Bucks, what they have is Giannis, Drew, and Connaughton. And Connaughton's interesting. He's up and down, but we'll give it to him. But there are some players outside of this that they could have done better at. And, this is an interesting one. I didn't realize this looking at Jordan Nwora, who's getting 1,100 minutes, and then Brook Lopez and Wes Matthews. Like, these players, in my opinion, for a contender are just sort of unforgivable.
Yeah, Wes Matthews, a little too old as well.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
I'm
impressed
saying. Like,
he's still in the league, Dre, to be honest, because when he was in his 20s, he had some ridiculous injuries. So to be playing his mid-30s still, that's very impressive. But yes, he should not be the starting lineup for the Bucks.
A lot of this is sour grapes on my own part, particularly for my Denver Nuggets. I mean, I guess unofficially the the Bucks are my team as well. But it just infuriates me if a team has a cheat code and fails at what I would call the easy thing. Like, you don't re-sign Brook Lopez. It's that simple. He's old. He was good when he was younger. He's old. You let him go. Heck, you even give, they briefly got Greg Monroe. That doesn't look like Greg Monroe is back. That's a shame. Younger days, we argue that would be a good move, but it looks like Greg Monroe probably maybe out of the league a little too much, whatever. It's just like when teams leave 2 to 3 or maybe 4 to 5 wins on the table on not getting average players for average money to back up a good player, it makes me upset. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the Bucks. Now, same point I actually made about your Warriors is if you've got like a star player, MVP player, Giannis, in your case it was Curry, and a couple of good pieces around them, you're so close to a title. I saw the most locally, I saw the most ridiculous article headline, which was like, why the Bucks had no shot to repeat this year. And I was like, you can't make a game 7 in the NBA playoffs against the top team in the NBA playoffs and then have anybody give you the argument that your team couldn't have won a title. So the Bucks, couple bad bounces, couple, bad injury.
Yeah.
Not as good as they could have been, which is frustrating, but the Bucks could have repeated this year. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think they were good enough, and it just didn't go their way. Boston was better. I mean, Boston's defense, they were just really good. They shut the Bucks down to 45% or 46% effective field goals. So
really, that is really good.
Yeah. So Boston's defense is very, very good.
We've kind of noted this. I think a lot of sour grapes went into round 1 against the Nets. I saw a lot of Houston Rockets fans. Shout out to a friend of the show, Greg Steele, the Greek god of stats, where he was like saying, the Nets had no hope. And of course, any fan of James Harden is, rooting, any 76ers fan and any Houston Rockets fan is like, screw the Nets.
Shout out to the Greek god of stats, Greg Steele, by the way. He just released a new website, and I forget the name of it right now, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll get a link in the show notes if I do the show notes, Brian. But I'll say a little plus minus heavy. But I have been talking to him about him getting someone's produced stuff up there too. So that's nice. But what I was going to say is, I mean, the Nets, the Nets were a stronger team. We made that observation, right? Like, they got really dinged by regular season injury, went into the playoffs, were a stronger team than they looked, and then the Celtics just wiped the floor with them. And I think that was a little misleading because I think the Nets were stronger than they appeared. So 100% agree with you on Boston. And I mean, to your point, second in defensive rating in the NBA. So we love it.
And that's just on Basketball Reference. I think on other sites they're number one.
It depends. I mean,
Yeah.
I trust Basketball Reference's defensive rating per 100.
They're number one or tied for number one at worst, right?
All right. Should we hit up Miami-Delphia?
Sure.
Miami versus Philadelphia. All right. The key thing I'll make here is injury is bad. And a thesis I have, and I may turn this into a post. That's my nomenclature to say it will never be a post, right, Brian? Is Joel Embiid Anthony Davis 2.0? I was really proud of a tweet I made where I was saying, you know, there is the mainstream opinion. Anthony Davis was injury prone. Of course, he wasn't going to lead the Los Angeles Lakers. And there's the Joel Embiid is an MVP candidate, and the future looks bright. And I do the Pam from the Office, and I say they're the same picture. It's worth noting, I was looking over his career, Brian, and if I'm not mistaken, Joel Embiid has never had a season where he has played over 2,000 minutes and not missed at least a game in the NBA playoffs. This season, he finally cracked 2,000 minutes again. So he cracked 2,000 minutes in his third season in the NBA, 2019, which is, of course, the depressing season where the Toronto Raptors won, and this was just bad luck, right? The triple bounce. Kawhi Leonard makes the first Game 7 buzzer-beating game winner, and it, you know, just destroys the hope of Philadelphia. And very much like the Los Angeles Lakers in 2004, Philadelphia kind of explodes. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But even in that season, if I recall, I think he missed some playoff games. So, and then this year he missed some and came back injured, and he was playing with a broken face and a broken hand. And I just find it amusing for people to think that Joel Embiid is going to stay healthy when realistically in his career, he has never been healthy. And I find, like I said, Anthony Davis is like watching him a couple of years in the future. Another follower of the show, Paul DeVos, has tweeted about like big players and how they just don't last. You think Shaq in the best case scenario, which was being minutes managed by I almost Phil Jackson. I almost said Greg Popovich. I meant to say Phil Jackson. He still was missing a bunch of games and was still falling apart by the time he moved on to the Heat. So it's like Joel Embiid, I just don't think is going to hold on, especially not if the team is willing to play him through injury. And I don't know if you remember this early on when Brett Brown was still the coach, there were cases where Brett Brown wanted to rest him and either the front office or Joel Embiid said, I'm going to play, and he would get played. So I think, unfortunately, the incentives right now are for Joel Embiid to get played, and I think he's just going to get injured. So I feel bad about that, but it also feels weird to note that this series that went 4-2, I think Joel Embiid missed two games, came into the third game, did not look great in the third and fourth game. I think they won the third game, but he didn't look good and did not look good in game 4. So it's like, I think if he had been healthy, there was a shot they could have won this series, but I also just don't know the odds that he's going to stay healthy.
Yeah, and the big story about this series in general was Harden, right? You know, who knows how healthy he was, but everyone just said, well, he pulled a Ben Simmons, he quit, he refused to shoot in the fourth quarter of the last game. I haven't heard all the postmortem on this and what Harden's side of the story is yet, but I mean, clearly the whole Harden-Ben Simmons debacle hurt both teams in the end. You know, we were in favor.
I mean, sorry to be mean, like the Nets, if James Harden is on the decline, they managed to get out of him. For at bare minimum, Simmons is cheaper and younger, so he has a better chance of bouncing back, and they got 2 productive players out of it.
Oh, long term, sure. I'm still with you and would want their side of the trade. I'm just saying for this season, I mean, maybe they both would have gotten hurt, and if they had not gotten traded anyway, right?
It's you could be right. But James Harden looked okay looked good during the rest of the regular season. So maybe he could have helped their seed position, and they wouldn't have been playing the Boston Celtics.
Who knows?
So.
And I don't have an answer on Embiid, to be honest. You know, what people will say is, well, this is it. This is the end of your season. You may as well just play, right? But then look what happened when Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant did that against the Raptors. They both had to miss a full year because they played hurt. And there's just not a great answer.
James Harden last season came back on a hurt leg for the 76ers in the playoffs. And what's really frustrating, another player we're going to come up to is Chris Paul, but James Harden arguably cost the 76ers last season by trying to come back. If he had stayed on the bench, I think they had a good shot of advancing. He played so bad, it knocked him out of the series, and then he has not looked as good.
Wait, you
Now, by
mean
the way,
Brooklyn? He was on 76ers last
yeah,
year.
on Brooklyn last
Okay.
year, he came back injured in the playoffs, and the game where Kevin Durant misses with his foot on the line against the Bucks. A lot of that was due to the fact that James Harden was playing injured those last 2 or 3 games, and it let the Milwaukee Bucks back in it.
Yeah, it's to me this is just like it's such a fine line. I don't think anyone has a good answer to this question. Should you play hurt? Does it depend on the injury? I bet doctors would have an opinion about this. Like maybe if your face is broken, you're gonna play poorly, but it's not a long-term risk. I don't know.
Yeah, but Joel Embiid's also got hand. I mean, so it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
I guess it's more to me just going as these injuries rack up, like Klay Thompson's another good example. As the injuries on a player rack up, the optimism that player is going to just bounce back as good the next time. And I've kind of noticed I want to look over this. I may at some point, Brian, look over Joel Embiid because I've made this observation. Joel Embiid, when he's going full strength, is a star. I'm not going to dispute that. But the reason, for instance, this season he wasn't close to MVP when you compare him to Nikola Jokic is he misses like 5-10 games. He comes back. He doesn't look great as he's coming back. He ramps up. It's almost like a race car that spins out and has to reaccelerate. And so as the injuries rack up, the belief that he's going to just keep bouncing back 100%, I don't buy it. And history is not on his side for that. And actually, last time we had Dave Barry on the show, he was talking draft research, and he was noting that the age curve is different. This isn't a shocker for guards versus big men. Guards tend to last longer, and there's a really, really simple physiological explanation in the NBA, which is if you're a big person, super tall, super heavy, and you're running a lot, it wears out your body. So there's that. The fun part about Miami versus Philadelphia, of course, is that it's a revenge series.
yeah.
Jimmy Butler, right? So I think you know the drama a little better than me, but I mean, I believe the case was that Philadelphia just didn't want to max him initially. I think, am I not wrong? I think they eventually tried to, and then by then he was already out the door.
Yeah. So I don't know what like the current, thinking is on what happened in that situation. But I remember at the time that I think Embiid just didn't like Butler was one thing. So Embiid wanted him gone. But Butler himself, of course, famously, when he buried the Sixers this season in the playoffs, said, "Oh, you chose Tobias Harris over me." And it's true. They did pay Tobias Harris big money and did not pay Jimmy Butler. So I'm not knowledgeable enough to say if they could have pulled it off and kept Butler there. But it's clear that he was the best player in that series. May even be the best player in this Boston series. I just think he's really good and is, if he's healthy, he's going to be a top 10, maybe top 5 player every year.
Yeah, I mean, what's also rough is, I mean, he has been going down in minutes too, but he's still good enough to be worth it. And we're seeing the payoff right here, right? Is if you have a player like that can make it to the playoffs healthy, it can be everything. I am seeing that he was like clashing with leadership, and I mean that's fine too, right? It's just like what's funny. Actually, I do want to throw this out. Apologies, I completely spaced this, but I want to throw it out. Joel Embiid, I know we kind of like him, but the last 2 seasons he has gotten on my nerves. With the absurdity of throwing teammates under the bus, he kind of has a Kobe mentality without the rings to back it up. And you can argue if Kobe deserves his rings, like if you should give, Kobe would. There's that famous meme of him where someone like is making fun of him and he holds up his hand and he counts to 5, and the response I've given to that is like, when I count to 5, I don't need Shaq to count to 3 for me first. But regardless, Kobe Bryant had the pedigree and would throw teammates under the bus. Joel Embiid has done that, and I've noted, he played horribly in this series, and it was due to injury. I have no complaint. I'm very conflicted on that because I can point the finger at Joel Embiid for why Miami won, but at the same time, I can say I never like injury. But what is annoying me is Joel Embiid's, throwing his teammates under the bus when it's on him, and it would be in my opinion, perfectly reasonable for him to say that. It is also funny to what you were saying with him potentially clashing with Jimmy Butler. I don't know if that's true because he was saying he loved Jimmy Butler and missed him. But Jimmy Butler, I'm like reading when he was on JJ Redick's podcast about it, where he was, saying
JJ Redick was
like,
also on that 76ers team.
yeah, they were on the team together. And then, he was saying all of this stuff about how they were saying if you can control Jimmy Butler and Butler not liking that, that's when he decided. So maybe I'll look into that more. But
I just don't know.
I mean, what's interesting about Jimmy Butler is the wise maneuver for any team is if you have a productive starter, like productive or better, and you get market rate for them, just take it and don't think about it. Get it off the plate. I've made this argument before, like Milwaukee back in the day. I've gotten credit posthumously for this. After the fact, looking back, whatever you want to say.
Well, there is going to be a Beetlejuice sequel, Jace, unless you're speaking to us from the dead. It's not posthumous.
Not yet. But what I was going to say is when Giannis got his first max contract, I was like, yeah, this makes sense, falling off a log decision. And he had only kind of had like one good season. And I just made the argument
it was less than that. It was only a few months at the end of one season.
Yeah. And I was kind of just like, if you look at his age, if you look at how he performed, if you look at what this means, I was like, this is a falling off the log decision. Don't worry about it. Just get it out of the way and move on. And I think in general for teams, that's the case. And we're going to talk about that with Jalen Brunson on Dallas. But then, of course, talking about it on Miami, it's like, if you have a player that's worth the max, don't haggle because you are haggling over millions. You are haggling over small percentages on your salary cap, which run the risk of costing you that in playoff money. So, by the way, shout out to your guy, Klay Thompson. I'd forgotten about this too, Brian. But Klay Thompson had an interview where he brought up that players don't get paid for the playoffs. Really, they get like bonuses, but they don't get the same salary as the regular season. There's no incentive really for NBA players to play in the playoffs. Conversely, NBA teams make a ton of money because those are the most premium seats, the most premium airtime, right? That's when you can get people re-upped really easy for season tickets. The playoffs make the most money for teams. So when you have a team that goes, I can't afford to pay Jimmy Butler or hypothetically, let's say James Harden, $4 million extra this season, it's like one extra round of the playoffs pays for that on its own. So like Jimmy Butler, the line I have in the script is like, don't piss off a star. That's what the 76ers did. And I've said this a million times now, but it depresses me because I think if Hinkie had been in control, that never happens, right? I think Hinkie, Butler stays, and this could have been a very interesting team, and didn't happen. Anything else on Miami, Philadelphia?
Yeah, Doc Rivers is taking a lot of heat as well, and he also
rightfully so
threw Ben Simmons under the bus last year, and he's probably going to be gone as well.
Well, I thank you for bringing it up because I completely spaced this. I've made a joke that I have to like find a Hallmark gift card for this. Doc Rivers is legitimately the most underwhelming playoff coach ever, to just blow, he's blown multiple 3-1 leads, right? He's had star teams that have underperformed. He is a horrible coach, and I don't understand how he keeps getting jobs. So it's probably on him. I'll actually give it. And I mean,
he's been accused of just like not running any actions on offense, stuff like that.
Yeah. Whatever he does in the playoffs is terrible, and I don't understand how he keeps getting jobs. And I mean, just to throw back, like Daryl Morey has actually made some good moves on Philadelphia. I still think he's overrated as a GM, but as I've noticed a couple of times here, my conspiracy theory was that the James Harden Ben Simmons trade was in the works for a really, really long time, and then Ben Simmons was just more injured than people thought. And I mean, you of all people with the Golden State Warriors, if you remember back in the day with Andrew Bogut got shut down for a season once, and it was hilarious because during the season, like Andrew Bogut's fine, he's going to be back. Like, oh, he's out for the season. It's like, oh, you knew. So I think there was something weird going on with Simmons, and I think it was in nobody's best interest to reveal that, right? We always bring up how it's like wrestling and kayfabe and all that. It's like that situation was so odd to me that I think there was other stuff going on, and I still think that it'll be fun to find out after the fact.
Yep.
All right, let's go on to Golden State versus Memphis. The Warriors are back, Brian. Can't keep the Warriors down. Lucked into it. The Warriors are the kings of stumbling on wins, between Andre Iguodala and Kevin Durant forcing their way onto the team, to Draymond Green coming out of nowhere after they whiffed on the Kevin Love trade, to Gary Payton, Juan Toscano Anderson, Jordan Poole this season, right? Like beginning, you were right, Brian. You've been right repeatedly about the Warriors. I think early season, I was like, you were too optimistic on Poole, get over yourself. And then round one of the playoffs, the metaphor I made was to for Ted Lasso fans. So in the show Ted Lasso, they have a star guard forward, whatever you want to call it, Jamie Tart, and he benches himself. And then they have Danny Rojas off the bench, and he's amazing too. And they're excited. They're going to play both. And then, of course, plot wise, because it's a scripted show, Jamie Tart gets traded, and they're really frustrated because, like, oh my God, we had two amazing forwards. We're going to be unstoppable. You guys had that with Jordan Poole, with Steph Curry being injured. And then Steph Curry, at least in round one, comes back and looks great too. And you're like, oh, okay. So you have two Steph Currys. And that was against the Nuggets. I was like, yeah. I was like, our entire thesis about the Nuggets having a shot against the Warriors was, Steph Curry, he's been injured. If he's not 100%, this series is over. And then you came out in round one and had two Currys. So there you go.
Yeah, and I have not paid enough penitence on Jordan Poole, I think. I have been high on him since the beginning of this year, like you said. But in past years, I've been like, look, this guy can't shoot. He can't play defense. He shouldn't be in the league. But we were seeing all these, typical NBA PR stories, right? Oh, he's in the best shape of his life. He's a gym rat. He's in the gym longer than anyone. Turned out to be true. I think they did legitimately develop him and deserve a lot of credit for it. And he does kind of play like Steph Curry now. He's got all the dribbling, all the hesitations, all the step back shots. He can move off the ball like Curry. He's got a great first step. He's much more athletic, and he can take it to the rim. Defense is definitely a work in progress still, but yeah, I mean, he's been really good on offense, and I would pick him over Klay Thompson going forward.
Oh, easily, yeah. I would agree with that.
He is great.
For many, many reasons. So, yeah, that was he's been great. And if we look at but the Golden State, so I got to throw this out there. This got fun. So, of course, there was some back and forth. Dylan Brooks got suspended for a game, sadly not for more, or how do I phrase this? Dylan Brooks got pulled from a game that the Memphis Grizzlies wound up winning, in large part thanks to Dylan Brooks getting pulled, and then he got suspended. And it's like, the real penalty should have been making Dylan Brooks play. But this kind of got some back and forth going because people were like, Dylan Brooks is a dirty player, and he took out Gary Payton. I mean, this let's be real here. This does suck. I think that Golden State against Dallas is the favorite, and Golden State managed to pull it out against Memphis for a variety of reasons. I think Boston is, we've already noted this, is the strongest team remaining in the playoffs. And if you come down to margins, Gary Payton being injured could be huge, and Dylan Brooks took him out. So this series was rough in that the Memphis Grizzlies, who, so interesting, I'm looking at this too. On paper, they were worse than the Golden State Warriors SRS wise. So the right team won anyway. But they took out one of your top starters. And even if we don't say top, let's just say a starter. That's huge in the playoffs. It was funny. I tweeted out about how injury to a star player can matter a lot more than a lot of the X's and O's stuff that analytics people like us, like to profess, like to tell teams. And someone came back and they're like, doesn't have to be a star. And they're absolutely right. If the Arturo principle is your top six players dictate your playoff success, and if one of your top six guys goes down, that throws a lot of disarray into your plans. And the Warriors lost Gary Payton because of Dylan Brooks, and Dylan Brooks is also terrible. So it was a double whammy. You lost a good starter, and in exchange, the opponent got to take one of their worst players out of the game. And Gary Payton, I think, is going to try and get back for the finals, but is out for at least the next round, and that really sucks and could hurt you. But so Memphis versus Golden State, though, this was starting to go back and forth. And then Ja Morant got injured and had to leave the series with a bone bruise. Now, on the replay, I forget the player, but on the replay, it looked like a player grabbed his leg. It might have been Poole, right?
It was Poole.
And it didn't look great, but then so this is where it gets silly. That didn't look great and looked a little unsporting of Poole. But then the injury is like, oh, that wasn't from that. So we got into this
That's right.
ridiculous territory where I'm sorry, Brian, I'm gonna do it to Memphis. Very Republican, right? Where
Just
they're
asking questions, Dre. I'm just asking a few
exactly
questions.
just asking questions or pointing at the other side and saying they're doing something wrong when it's something you did. So it's like I was really frustrated with this series in that I couldn't cheer for Memphis, right? After that Dylan Brooks play, I'm like, I can't. It's impossible for me to cheer. And conversely, on the Warriors, I think their chances are hurt. So I'm just angry at the end of the series, is the reality. Because I'm going, the team I wanted to win after the fact won, right? I mean, I should be nicer. And, same kind of boat as Dallas, Brian, who we'll talk in a second. But like, the Warriors are a team that just keeps getting lucky. And so they're this friend at the casino that you're saying, that is such a stupid bet. And then they win. And you're like, God damn it. And so I'm kind of sick of that. So if they win again, right? If they win another title after we're like, oh my God, that Wiseman stuff was so stupid. And what were you thinking? It's just going to be annoying, right, Brian? What is it? The Andrew Wiggins trade, which still, I mean, he's fine. It's so annoying for people to think that a $30 million a player playing average is a win when that was lucky. But
That's all-star starter Andrew Wiggins for you, Dre. Welcome to Wiggins Island, where he locks down everyone, including Luka Doncic. No, I mean, health is the biggest story of that series. Like you said, Ja got hurt. They did deliver that 40-point blow up without him, but still, they kind of needed him to close that series out. But the most important thing, right? Steph Curry, Draymond Green, they were healthy. And
ish.
yeah,
Curry's worrying me a little, but he's okay. And we'll have to.
for now, they're able to play heavy minutes effectively, right?
Okay.
And yeah, we'll see. And yeah, Gary Payton did get hurt. Also, a big one, Andre Iguodala has a neck injury and is not playing right now. And I think most people would say that doesn't matter too much, but I disagree. I think they would just get him in there and play crunch time minutes, and he'd be very good and important to them. But here's the thing about Peyton and Iguodala. The Warriors are just so loaded this year. I mean, you said the top 6 guys. Arturo looked at the data for that in the playoffs. If you're talking about their top 7 players, right, it's Poole and Otto Porter coming off the bench, and then they're giving Looney heavier minutes as a starter. I mean, that's really solid. If they just ride with those 7 and there's no further injuries, I think they have plenty of gas in the tank with how stacked that roster is.
I'm looking at this too. Damian Lee is their 8th guy. That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Damian Lee has gotten some minutes, and he's been fine. Kuminga's even gotten in there. Hasn't been as good as the regular season, and he probably won't get as many minutes going forward. But, they have some dudes they can play. Wiggins and Clay are very up and down on offense, right? Wiggins was really good in Game 1 against Dallas. Clay was good in Game 6 against Memphis. They both have a lot of bad games on offense as well. But they've been so solid on defense, and that's the theme of the show, right? They just clamped down on Memphis so hard. They could not score at all most of the time. And let's get back to Taylor Jenkins, the coach, right? Not only did he do this ridiculous, I'm just asking questions. Maybe Jordan Poole's 2 fingertips gave a bone bruise to Ja Morant. No, of course he didn't. But the biggest indictment of him is letting Dylan Brooks take over the Ja Morant role and chuck up all those shots and have those horrible games. Like, he just gave him the keys to the car, and I think, Taylor Jenkins really hurt Memphis in that series.
Well, here's what's funny. Another shout out. Ben Guest a while ago texted me about Dylan Brooks and Jaren Jackson. And again, like the theme, here's what's rough, Brian. The only team remaining that, let's see, probably Boston. Actually, I'll give it to Boston. So of the teams remaining, and Miami, actually, this is annoying. Boston and Miami, I think, are both well constructed. I think it's just that there's a cap on the caliber of their start. They both have a star. They do have Tatum, Robert Williams, Jimmy Butler. Those guys are good, but out west in particular, I've been very frustrated with team construction. And Golden State is the better of the two, and the frustrating part is just if they can move on from Clay. And this is a classic sunk cost fallacy for any franchise. Like, the key of this was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the Lakers, where it's just like if your player gets old enough and injured enough, they're not who they were. And the real weakness on Golden State at this point is Klay Thompson. If he has one more good playoff series in him, we've been arguing for years they should move on. After 2 injured seasons, he still is not even close to old Klay, and old Klay we thought was overrated. But Memphis was frustrated. Dylan Brooks and Jaren Jackson are unacceptable. And they've had them for 4 years. Our argument has been about rookies or players on rookie contracts, that the benefit you have is they are underpaid by virtue of the salary cap. And all you have to do is wait. And then if they're not worth it, you move on. And Dylan Brooks and Jaren Jackson are both getting paid. And I would actually say Jaren Jackson is a cautionary tale, because he was picked 4th in the NBA. He was picked 3rd or 4th. He was picked in front of Luka Doncic. That was a funny point. That was coming up. So at one point, right, the Suns and the Grizzlies were both in the playoffs, and they could have picked, and the Suns and the Grizzlies, because it went Suns, Grizzlies, Kings, right? Kings with the horrible one. Who is that it? There's got to be one other
Hawks
team.
had Trae Young.
Hawks got Trae Young.
Yeah.
So Hawks were in the play. Yeah, at one point they were basically saying there are multiple teams in the playoffs that could have gotten Luka Doncic that passed on him. But Jaren Jackson was a reasonable looking draft pick. I actually went back and looked at Arturo Galetti's old numbers for it. And what I'll say is he did actually really like Ayton, and he really liked Doncic. And what he actually did is he said on Doncic, like Doncic was below Ayton, if I recall. But then what he did is he came out and said, by the way, he's better than his numbers suggest, because don't forget, he was like a teenager winning EuroLeague MVP.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to say his numbers say he's this good, but by the way, we think he's going to be better. Anybody that tries to give the revisionist history that Luka Doncic was not an obvious top 3 pick in the NBA draft is lying to themselves. And anybody that tries to argue that it was a win-win is wrong, in part because Atlanta got Trae with the number 3 and Dallas got Luka with the number 5, which is a huge difference in salary as well. But Jaren Jackson was the number 4 pick, and he is bad. He's just not a good player. And he looked good in college. I was looking up his college numbers. And you just never know if a player that looks good in college is going to be a productive NBA player or not. And he is not. And so Memphis, what's just frustrating is we just said top 6. 2 of their top 6 players are bad, and they've committed money to both. So it's unlikely they're going to move on. So I actually feel kind of bad in that everybody is really excited about the Memphis Grizzlies going forward, because why not, right? They're the number 2 seed. They look really great. Actually, I mean, this is kind of interesting. Dylan Brooks he's not overpaid for his role, but he's overpaid for his production, which is a weird point. But they should just move on from him. And he's got a very movable contract. He's at $12 million a season for 2 years. But Memphis just has some bad players, and it's really frustrating because 2 of your favorite players, Ja Morant, Brandon Clark, I think those were your 2 favorite players in the draft. They're both great. If you give Jaren Jackson
pretty good draft
to Brandon Clark, yeah, that was an amazing draft for the Memphis Grizzlies. If you give those players minutes, if you get rid of Jaren Jackson, give those minutes to Brandon Clark and move on from Dylan Brooks, this team is in an amazing shot. I am worried about it going forward. And this series was just kind of frustrating to go like, yeah, injury hurts you, but bad strategy hurts you more.
I'm against you on Jaren Jackson here, kind of. And what I mean by that is I like the idea of him. He does some really good stuff. He plays defense. He blocks shots. But Dre, he's 22 years old. That's the problem. They shouldn't have put him in there and said, you and Dylan Brooks are top 2 options on offense. Just go, right? I mean, that was a mistake. So I'm not saying that they should cut him and, trade him right away. What I'm saying is his role should have been smaller, and maybe he'll develop in a few years.
I like the idea of Jaren Jackson.
Yeah.
That might have to be the title of this show, Brian. I do not like either. I think they should move on. I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, good luck with Golden State. I am conflicted on who I'm rooting for. Let's get into that in the next season or series. I was talking about this ahead of show. Namely, Dallas, I am conflicted on for many, many reasons. One of the major ones is, despite being kind of like fans-ish of Dallas, right? Like Mark Cuban follows us, James Mercado and Bob Bulgaris have worked with him. I think James Mercado is still with them, but we've been nice with those folk. So we like the franchise. I think they still have Jenny Busek. Am I not wrong? Could be wrong.
I'm
I
not
think
sure
she
where
signed
she
on
is
as
right now.
assistant coach. I'm pretty sure she did, but I'll look it up. Anyway, all that stuff going. Conversely, though, routinely we get in arguments with them about productive players, and we end up being right, and then we kind of don't get any credit, if that makes sense. The three major ones: Chris Kaman, Monte Ellis, and then Kristaps Porzingis. So all three players going, this is a horrible one, a horrible player for this team to pick up. It doesn't make any sense. We get told we're wrong at the time. The arguments for like Kristaps Porzingis were like, we didn't even have to use a gun, implying it was a robbery at the time. And then we end up being right all the time, and it's crickets. And I'm like angry at that, because I'm like, I get the flack from my argument at the time, and then I don't get the adulation after it comes to fruition. There's that. Additionally, they've had some issues in the front office recently. I mean, there's even stuff coming out, like Don Nelson settling out of court. So there's been a lot of iffiness around that franchise. By the way, I looked it up. Jenny Busek has moved on to the Indiana Pacers, and that is a great spot to be in. They might be a new favorite, Brian, because Tyrese Halliburton and Jenny Busek. So actually, I might be a Pacers fan next season. We'll see about that. But additionally, lots of weirdness in the front office, and then like with all of like the Me Too stuff and problems in the front office, signing Jason Kidd was just a ridiculous. Like, pick any other coach, right? So all of that to be said to me, like, I don't know if I feel good rooting for him. Conversely, though, I'm a contrarian and get annoyed at mainstream arguments, and a couple of the major ones that popped up. Jason Kidd being a bad coach. On the Bucks, everybody's like, he's a horrible coach. He should never have a job. And I'm watching him this series get proclaimed as being a great coach. And I'm like, what happened? Another player that comes up routinely is Luka Doncic on defense. In general, when it comes down to players being called good or bad at defense, I kind of roll my eyes because it's team-based. Andrew Wiggins, I saw this today. Greg Steele was pointing out that Andrew Wiggins looks good on defense with Dallas or Golden State. Sorry, Brad. Andrew Wiggins looks good on defense with Golden State, but he didn't look good previously for like the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's like, he's on a better squad. And it's like, it is almost as if the team scheme on defense matters a heck of a lot more than any individual. Shocker, I know.
Wiggins is way better on defense, though.
He absolutely, but I mean,
he's even rebounding now.
But I mean, I guess what I'll say though is that when it comes down to defense, so much of it is team based that we get into these nitpicky, on this show, the Boxscore Geeks show, we argue that a lot of the explicit box score statistics are sufficient to explain which players you should target. And then when you look at players that are called really good or really bad at basically on-ball defense, you go, it is so contextually based on the team that they're on, and teams can still get around it. So two examples, right? Andrew Wiggins looked like a bad defender on the Timberwolves, looks like a great defender on Golden State. Luka Doncic, we're told, is a bad defender, but the Golden State or Dallas Mavericks should not have the script in front of me, Brian. The Dallas Mavericks, as you noticed, are 6th in the NBA in defense and did have some stifling defense against Phoenix. So a lot of these myths about defense bug me, and Dallas is kind of proved, it was kind of fun to see him because it was like after game 2, that blowout, they were like, Luka Doncic is just a major weakness on defense and Phoenix is going to exploit him. And the next game they shut down Phoenix, and it's like, if he is that bad at defense, why isn't he just destroyed every game? Do other teams not have game tape? Do other teams not know that? That seems like a ridiculous assertion to me. If you were in baseball and you had a hitter who couldn't hit a certain type of pitch, every pitcher would just throw that pitch to him. So I just don't buy it. So again, Dallas is nice to prove a lot of mainstream narratives wrong while also having some mainstream narratives I don't like to root for. So it's an interesting franchise in that. And then against Phoenix, the reality, here's what's annoying. Age and injury suck. Chris Paul got injured, clearly. Chris Paul was playing great. He's 37 years old. The team this reminds me of, Brian, tell me if this rings a bell, was the 54-win Knicks with Jason Kidd. where
Interesting.
it seemed the same. The Knicks played really great. They got to the second round of the playoffs, and they were playing on the backs of Tyson Chandler and Jason Kidd, and like Jason Kidd gave out in the middle of the playoffs, and that's all she wrote. And this theme's the same, right? Chris Paul looked amazing, and then just Chris Paul wheels fell off in the middle of the playoffs, and suddenly this lockdown defender, great offensive player, looks terrible, and that is enough. I mean, that is the reality of any playoff series is one starter injury away from flipping the tides, and we've seen that multiple times in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the Chris Paul defense thing is funny because Pat Beverly, who played for Minnesota, right, and he just played a lot against Phoenix recently, he went on TV, I think it was on ESPN, and just started burying Chris Paul's defense and said he can't guard anyone anymore. And come on, it's Pat Beverly. He's such a big-time heel. But he knows about defense. You know, even though Chris Paul was good on offense earlier in that series before he got hurt, maybe at his age and small stature, maybe he can't defend as well as he used to. But to your point, Phoenix was a top defensive team all year, so clearly he's not that bad on defense. It's just Luka Doncic was the best player in that series, and he's just really good. I think Phoenix didn't have the answer. A big part of it also is I'll give Devin Booker similar credit to Jordan Poole, right? I used to be a big hater, and he's improved a lot, but I still don't think he's a MVP caliber player like a lot of people do, and he's just not enough to carry you against Luka.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, I actually put this some good company, people have noted. So Luka Doncic is 23, and two other players that made the NBA Finals at age 23, LeBron James and Kevin Durant, both made their first. And I am comparing Luka Doncic to LeBron James for many reasons. You know, both basically a high school student that came right into the NBA. And then additionally, you know, I mean, let's go to the box score geeks. Let's go to the Dallas Mavericks really quick, because I'll say this, even 50% Steph Curry on paper, the Warriors are still kind of the favorite. It's hard with like Gary Payton, but okay. The Dallas Mavericks have Luka Doncic, who's really, really good. Maybe Spencer Dinwiddie, but he is really low on minutes, and I don't know how he's playing in the playoffs. They have one star player. They have Luka Doncic, who's really good and has stepped it up in the playoffs.
Well, I can tell you, here's what I think about the Mavericks. So you mentioned this earlier. Getting rid of Porzingis was huge. Also, and this is always the mean one, Tim Hardaway Jr., who's not terrible, but him getting hurt really paved the way for Jalen Brunson and Finney Smith to get way more minutes. They were great per minute in the past, but this year they gave them much bigger roles, and having those two be the second and third fiddle to Luka, especially on defense, I think that's been the big insight of Jason Kidd.
And I'll say, by the way, I'm looking at the 2007 Cleveland Cavaliers, and it looks the same with, this is kind of cool, Luka Doncic looking even better than LeBron James at their respective ages. So future is bright for Dallas, but come on, you guys the Dallas Mavericks have had too many good people on their analytics staff, even ones that I've butted heads with on decisions, to not make smarter calls. So it's like, get Luka Doncic some help. Please don't make this a Dirk Nowitzki 2.0 where he has to wait forever for his ring. He is too damn good. And Brian, I'm going to throw you a quick trivia question. Can you name? I'm going to go minutes.
No, the answer
I'll give you
no.
brownie points if you can name three of the top 5 non-LeBron Cleveland Cavaliers and the 2-7 Cavaliers.
Wait, say that again?
So 3 out of the top 5. So outside of LeBron James, can you name 3 players in terms of top minutes on that Cavaliers squad?
Which squad?
The 2007 squad that made the finals.
Oh, 2007. LeBron's first finals.
Because I'm basically saying Luka Doncic is the exact
what about
same
Anderson Varejao?
Boom, 1.
The point guard. Oh, what the heck was his name? I forget, but that small point guard that was there. Before Kyrie Irving.
Can't give you credit.
Can't give me credit for that.
Can't give you credit for that small point guard that was there.
No, I mean, that team's not very memorable. You're right.
Larry Hughes, Drew Gooden.
Drew Gooden.
This one is surprising. You didn't get El Gauskas because he was kind of fused.
I didn't think he would be top minutes, though.
Varejao, Eric Snow, I think is who you were talking about.
No, it wasn't Eric Snow. It's a different guy.
Sasha Pavlovich maybe, and then Danielle Marshall. I don't know.
Anyway.
That's all. Anyway, so but I'm just saying this team reminds me a lot of that, because if you look at the Dallas Mavericks, they're in the same situation, right? I think when we look back at the Dallas Mavericks in 15 years, Brian, it'll be like, are you able to name another top 5 player in terms of minutes, and maybe Jalen Brunson? Last point on this, Brian, for this series, because this did come up. I was going to throw out that Jalen Brunson, a story came out that he was like estimated to be worth like $55 million. And then the Mavericks passed, like, oh, mistake, he's going to get paid. And I made the argument that this is very much on the modern salary cap, he's worth the money because he's not like a star, but he's a good player. He's 162 wins per 48 plus 2 points over par. He was worth 8 wins this season. 55 million, which I think is somewhere around 15 mil a season. That is not a lot of money.
He's going to get a lot more than that, I think.
And so exactly, I'm saying like, that is my in general point, is that if you have a good starter on your team and it is within the range of a couple million, the loss upside, right? What you can lose if they have an amazing playoff series or an amazing season is huge. If you think you are going to resign them, though, the downside is just a couple million. So it's like, and then of course, what's even more frustrating is even if they get injured, even if they fall off a cliff, it is not hard to trade players in the NBA. It's one of the wildest things, right? No contract is untradeable. So it's like, if you have a good starter and they ask for like market rate, and you think you have a shot at contending, just give them market rate. And then if you really feel bad, just trade them off.
Yeah, I haven't looked into what their salary cap is like, but if they can find a way to pay Brunson and then just add one more guy, I think that's a champion caliber team with Finney-Smith and Luka. I think they had those 4 could, with the mystery player, could be enough.
This remains weird. So again, you have random conspiracy theories about the NBA, and the Mavericks, the issue that they have both had in terms of attracting stars and then some stars even leaving, think of like Jason Kidd, is just kind of baffling. So I don't know, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'm sure the salary cap is not in great shape. So
it's probably. I mean, it's probably. I don't think they can't be hurting that much.
Yeah, getting rid of Porzingis is kind of nice.
I mean, it was a couple bad players, which is fine. But when it comes down to it, Luka Doncic is actually a cheat code, right? Because I think he's still on his rookie contract, isn't he? At least for one more year.
Oh, I'm not sure, but yeah, long term, that's a problem.
But yeah, I was gonna say, and classic line like Pat Beverly, a lot of what he said was ridiculous and silly and whatever, but it's wrestling. We've acknowledged this, right? Like the players know that they've got to say inflammatory things to get on TV if that's what they want to do. And we were even making the point that like Pat Beverly is older and who knows how much longer he's got on him. So, and by the way, it looks like Luka Doncic does go up next year. So it looks like next year he does actually start getting paid, which hurts a little.
So that's probably why people are saying Brunson's going elsewhere.
But if they just get, if they can find a way to shed, say, Tim Hardaway, Davis Bertans, they're not horrible. They're actually not in bad cap shape. They can probably afford to re-sign and then go for it. Anyway, sorry about that. But yeah, Pat Beverly, it's just pro wrestling, and that that's what you've got to do. Players have to call other players out if they want to get in front of TV, and it is what it is.
No, I mean, to answer him, I think the Suns should run it back. They're good enough. Give Ayton that money, even though it's a little questionable. Go for it. Bring Chris Paul back. Give another shot with that core.
Yeah, I mean, the Ayton thing that was just fascinating to me, I'll throw 2 things out there. One is the way the NBA works is they have a max salary for top players. So it basically means that Ayton, even if you agree he's not a top 10 player, is still worth the money. And it is really, really hard to recoup a productive player that is worth a max contract.
Yeah, how do you replace him, right?
You might be able to, but it's just we never see teams do say like this. Let's say you take Ayton and you go and you say, hey, give me Brandon Clark, Steve Adams, and a couple of picks to Memphis Grizzlies, right? That would be something you could do. You look for undervalued assets that replace the production. Teams don't do that. What they do is they go, we'll give you Ayton for Bradley Beal. And it's like, okay, well,
Right.
then you lost a productive player, you gained back a player who's not as productive. You know, why go for that? And in general, that's my 2 cents. Is it's just like it's a very min-max strategy to running an NBA team. If they are close to an average NBA starter at the salary cap, give them the money, upgrade where you can. And if you just do that, you will eventually have a winning team. And eventually some team is going to screw up. It doesn't matter. And what's funny is there's always this market argument, right? Small market teams can't compete. And by the way, I hate that argument. And I've said this before. If we talk politics, like the small market teams need to compete with big market teams, that's the electoral college argument of basketball. So if you hate the electoral college and agree that it's stupid, which it is, you should agree that like it doesn't make sense that the Utah Jazz argue they should get as much chance of a star as the Los Angeles Lakers. But any market, look at freaking Indiana lucking into Halliburton. Look at the Kings lucking into Halliburton. It's like you will eventually find your way to a star. It just might take longer than you would like. But, like process wise, I would say the odds of an average NBA team, so 30 teams, the odds of an average NBA team getting a crack at a top 20 player does come along at least once every 5 seasons. More so if you're a big market team that players want to sign with, or a contender, but that is what it is.
Yep.
I don't know on Chris Paul. That's a tough decision, and we'll have to see. And that's going to be tough to replace. The good news is, with Mikal Bridges, Ayton, and Booker, they're actually a good-looking squad. So we'll see what they can do.
Points per game leader for this year, Dre, Devin Booker.
What
a player.
Should have gotten the points title, man.
Yep.
The NBA is rigged. All right. I'll just ask really quick predictions. Boston versus Miami, and Golden State versus Memphis. Who you got?
Oh, I can't go against the odds. Well, assuming that series went 1-1 with Boston taking the home court back, they're the favorites. And then with Golden State up 1-0, they're absolutely the favorites.
Yeah. So the Boston Celtics just won Game 2 by 25 points. Robert Williams didn't get as many points. Now the really rough one is Marcus Smart. Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. 24 points on 22 shots. Actually,
hey, if you're defensive player of the year, you got to get your shots up.
Although actually he kind of crawled back. He went 5 for 12 from 3. So this wasn't great shooting, but it wasn't horrible. 9 rebounds, 12 assists, 3 steals, 1 block. So he's actually going to have an above average game. That's kind of funny. But Jason Tatum is looking amazing. Horford was back in there, looked great in limited minutes. Jalen Brown looking good. So the Celtics look in great shape. Jimmy Butler, I'm actually really happy about this point. So I was noting that Marcus Smart being out last game was probably the biggest thing because Jimmy Butler went off. And people were like, Jimmy Butler was still going to torch Marcus Smart, which I agree with. I agree with that point. Like
he torches everyone.
Exactly. Well, I was spending that like, people are like, oh, this player's an amazing defensive player. It's like no defensive player can stop the best offensive players. It just doesn't work that way with how the NBA works. Jimmy Butler, though, and I made the point, though, I said they lost the last game by 11 points. So the Boston Celtics lost by 11 to the Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler put up 41 points. And I said, what if he only puts up 30 points? That's the game. Jimmy Butler's game 2, 29 points. So it's kind of nice when like a prediction comes true. It's like, yeah, Marcus Smart isn't going to stop Jimmy Butler, but if he holds him from 40 to 31 or to 30, there you go. So I agree. I think I'm going to agree with both. Although I've thrown this out, it's not quite a jobber. So from wrestling parlance, and wrestling, a jobber is a character that is essentially paid to lose. Now you kind of go one step above that, which is I'm going to call the Miami Heat Roddy Piper. So Roddy Piper never won a title with the WWE.
The mid-carders is who you're talking about.
Not even. He's an A-lister. Roddy Piper was an A-lister.
So you're going up a few tiers.
It's like Roddy Piper's job was to make people like Hulk Hogan look really, really good, right?
He was usually
but he was never going to win. And so exactly, and the heel's not supposed to win from that era of wrestling before kind of the Steve Austin anti-hero took off. So I've called the Miami Heat that, right? Like this is this team that, made it to the finals as a 6th seed, has looked really strong, looks really great. You got to love them with Jimmy Butler. They're not going to win a title, but they are an amazing opponent. So that's who they are. I agree with that. It would be nice to see him back in the NBA finals though. Although the bummer, by the way, is we're back to classic NBA in that every single team that is remaining in the Final Four has won a title in the last has won a title in like the last decade. About the Mavericks are the furthest out with 2011,
Yep.
and has also been close to a finals in that time too. So it's kind of a bummer that we're back to classic NBA where people that already have titles and finals appearances are in the finals. If we'd had a Memphis or a Phoenix advance, we could have seen something new. Is what it is. All right, Brian, I'm going to head us to shout outs. I actually can't think of any major ones at the moment. So unless you have any shout outs, we can have that be our show.
I've got a shout out to Kevon Looney, who's been getting big time minutes and also played all 82 games this season, which is one of 5 players to do that. Conventional wisdom these days is the best offense a team could run in the NBA is just 5 out, have your 5 3-point shooters and set pick and rolls. The Warriors are featuring heavy minutes of a lineup with Draymond Green and Kevon Looney together, who do both not really shoot threes, and they just don't care because they win with defense, and they can still run their offense with those big players who don't shoot threes. So Kevon Looney, 22 rebound game in the clincher in game 6 against Memphis. So he's playing great.
Love it. Yeah, and he's the 4th highest player on total wins on the Warriors, and I think the 5th on per minute. So yeah, he's amazing.
He's great.
Okay, Brian. Well, we'll see if it's another month or before or after round 3. Who knows? But we will be back. Good luck to your Warriors. Hope to see them back in the finals now that a lot of teams that I am not rooting for are out. And we'll see you next time. Oh, and I guess I should do the outro. So Boxscore Geek Show. You can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live whenever we go live, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. You can find us on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. And then, of course, the Boxscore Geek Show, iTunes and Stitcher. Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Nerd Numbers on Twitter. You can see I'm out of practice, Brian, because I completely forgot the outro, but I think I have major points. Yep. See you next time.